need to buy yourself a gun. What? Gun? What? Like a handgun. For personal protection. If somebody tries to mug you. What? What if your government tries to throw you in a can? What? You're gonna want a shotgun. Oh. What? An automatic rifle. And a lot of ammo. Gun?
We're all set to riot. Buy a gun before you lose your Second Amendment. Buy a gun. They'll burn you out like a Waco. They'll stick your ass in a camp. Check for the cops in riot gear. Gonna kick your ass and laugh. The revolution is on its way. Better lock and load your AK. Buy a gun, 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 buy a gun before you wish you bought a gun. Buy a gun, 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 buy a gun before you wish you bought a gun. We're all set to riot. Buy a gun before you lose your Second Amendment. Buy a gun. They gave your money to the banksters. They stole your pension funds. It's time that we took to the streets. It's time we had our turn. A revolution is on its way, and the founding fathers would say, buy a gun, 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 buy a gun before you wish you bought a gun. Buy a gun, 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 buy a gun before you wish you bought a gun. Revolution's not clean and neat. You gotta riot in the streets. Revolution's not clean and neat. You gotta drag them through the
Because it is Tuesday, we are live. This is PrimerTime on UCY.tv. My name is Michael, and I am voting none of the above.
My name is Nicholas, and I am voting for Dwayne Elizondo Hector Camacho.
He's got a 3-point plan.
That's right.
Hope. H-O-A-P, hope.
We got this motherfucker, not sure.
Yeah, so here we are in the aftermath of the Democratic debate, or the Democratic and the Republican primary in Iowa of 2016, and Ted Cruz takes the Republican side. 3 people who speak highly of guns, and I'm worried about their intent. And then on the Democratic side, we've got a virtual tie between Hillary and Bernie Sanders, and Hillary magically winning 6 coin tosses in a row to take the ties of the delegates. So,
yeah, I would venture to say that not many people can make 6 coin tosses happen in a row in their favor, unless the coin has whatever they call on both sides.
Yeah, double face, kind of like one of those old, one of them old silver shekels, like one of them 30 pieces of silver that they paid Judas back in the day. Yeah, that's what they were flipping for.
Yeah.
So
I will say this, that, you know, whatever Hillary calls us, for a candidate that had such an insurmountable lead in the polls to barely scrape by on what is being at I would say at most conservative estimates being ahead by merely 6 individual caucus members, this has to be looked at as nothing other than an utter defeat.
Yeah, you know, and what's worse is how she grandstanded after her, you know, her soaring and crushing victory and all that. Yeah, this is pretty shameful. This is looks like people are you know, voting none of the above. Now, this being a firearm show, not necessarily a politics show, I'd almost like to kind of cover like what the gun policy and the stances on firearms issues that these candidates have. And let's take the easy part first. Hillary.
Yeah, Hillary is definitely for all forms of gun control to include Australian-style confiscation.
Mr. and Mrs. America, turn them all in. Okay, so let's move to the socialist Jew, Bernie Sanders.
Yep, and he's the guy that says he comes from a rural state, so he's got a little bit more little bit more of a practical outlook on guns, is that he's not going to tell you he's going to ban them outright. He's just going to go ahead and do it.
Right. And you may be able to keep your semi-auto or lose your semi-autos and keep your bolt action, your lever action, and probably not your pistol, because that's where gun crime comes from. Okay, so that's the
right.
Democrats right there, because O'Malley dropped out. Loser.
Yeah, loser.
All right, so let's go to the Republican side. We're going to go with just ones we can name off the top of our head. We're not going to go with Santorum or Huckabee or that fat dude from Jersey because, well, screw them.
Well, the fat dude from Jersey is about gun control. Don't make any mistake.
Absolutely, and he will lie and tell you that he is now the Second Amendment's best friend. But let's go with the top tier. We've got Ted Cruz, who was the winner of Iowa. He claims to be a staunch constitutionalist, and he does appear to be pro-firearms in his stance, very pro-Second Amendment. However, I do think that he believes in the government's right to maintain the monopoly on violence, and in the end, that's the overriding key. So that's where I think Ted Cruz stands. He does stand for the Second Amendment, but he's still pretty good and okay with the government coming in and kicking your ass if you get out of line. All right, let's go to number 2, Donald Trump. Nick, what do you think about Donald Trump's stand on firearms?
I believe that he is as close to somebody who will I guess, he's the closest thing to Mayor Bloomberg in the sense that he doesn't necessarily need guns, and he doesn't necessarily believe that you need guns, but he can damn be sure that the people surrounding him have guns. And that to me is no different than anybody else that is on the socialist side of the house.
Right. Trump says that he has a concealed carry permit in New York, which is not necessarily something that a friend of firearms gets in New York. That's something more that's kind of an elitist symbol.
Right. And that would be akin to Dianne Feinstein having a concealed carry permit in California.
In San Francisco, right. These are the rules are meant for the little people, not for the big guys.
Yeah.
And
don't be mistaken.
If you're not Blade Runner, you're little people.
Well, don't be mistaken. I want people to understand that Trump is the wolf in sheep's clothing. I believe, especially when it comes to Second Amendment issues or the individual right to bear arms.
He's going to make it great. He's going to make America great again.
Yeah, he hasn't told anybody how he's going to make America great. He's just said that it's going to happen. He's going to make the most beautiful wall on the southern border, and some people are going to get through. That was a direct quote.
Trump will make the wall out of the bones of Muslims and ISIS, and he will make the Mexicans stucco it, and then he will finance it to them because they will pay for it.
Yeah, and the Mexicans love him.
And make America great again, and cheap hats made in China for everybody.
Yep. So let's take a look at probably who I think is the enigma on all three when it comes to firearms. I would have to say Marco Rubio.
Right. Marco Rubio doesn't get a whole lot of coverage regarding his stance on firearms as a Republican. He's supposed to have a pro-Second Amendment stance. I don't really know anything about his stance on firearms. It's
that would be because, like you said, it's not publicized. It's not a very big part of his platform, although he is a staunch advocate of the full faith and credit of the U.S. military's destruction abilities. And if you could almost say that one would equate to the other, I would say that you could probably be pretty safe in that assumption. However, I think that being more of a centrist, I think that he has to appeal to the more center part of the platform for the.
Well, and then we also have to look at where Rubio's backing come from, and Rubio is backed by a billionaire named Sheldon Adelson, who
chairman
is
of the Sands Corporation.
Chairman of the Sands Corporation, owner of several newspapers throughout the United States, and a ardent Zionist. And as we've seen before, the goals of the Zionists do not necessarily intersect with those of the United States. And it appears to be, once again, that the goals of the Zionists are to remove the hands from the Goyim. And don't ask any questions about it.
Yeah.
So knowing that that's who is backing Marco Rubio, I'm kind of not hopeful about his position on firearms rights.
Yeah. Well, and like
So
I said,
now,
you know, I think I called it on our show quite a while ago.
You did.
I said that I believe it will be Cruz and Rubio. And here's my logic. I believe that just as the Democratic Party is seeking the new wave of future voters, the Republican Party is quite fractured. And what they have to understand is that they are fighting this perception that they're not just the party of the elite, you know, rich whites, and they've had quite a bit of trouble shaking that because that's all they've elected. But if you take a look into account of, you know, Cruz or Rubio, you've got first generation Americans, with the exception of Cruz. I would call him like half first generation American.
Let's be straight up honest here. I mean, this is a decidedly not politically correct show, so we can talk about this. Both Cruz and Rubio do not have the typical quote unquote Mexican tan.
Yeah,
they don't look like wetbacks. No,
they don't. And this is one of the things that I think actually works in their favor, because you're going to look at those folks who are decidedly more tan than not. Those folks are typically going to vote, you know, for the people that are willing to give them benefits, whether it be citizenship, whether it be extended access to health care, you know, exemptions on paying taxes and whatnot. That's who they're going to go to. What you do is you have with Cruz and Rubio, you have first generation Americans who came from humble beginnings in this country and have managed to make something of themselves. And that's going to resonate, I think, with particularly the Cuban American community in Florida. Rubio himself is from Florida. Cruz is you know, born to an American mother and a Cuban American father at the end when he was in Canada. You know, here's the deal. It's a bunch of opportunities in the near term for the Republican Party to not only consolidate their base. Hold on, hear me out. Not only to consolidate their base, but to say we are at the forefront of realizing the power of the Hispanic voter. And what better way to do it than put forth two very polished politicians?
If you really truly want to harness the power of the Hispanic voter, the very first step is to buy Telemundo.
Oh yeah, well you'd have to get rid of their head Hillary supporter. What's his name? The guy that
Jorge Ramos' daughter happened to work, but I don't think necessarily that at this point it's even decided along those kind of racial lines. I still think that it's all about the money and rhyming and stealing, to be honest with you. So we should kind of move on down the list here. We should come to the number 4 in the that came in the caucus last night.
Dr. Ben Carson. No. Number 4 was Dr. Ben Carson.
I'm sorry, Dr. Ben Carson. Dr. Ben Carson has a very interesting history. He is not a politician by trade. He's a pediatric neurosurgeon, and he has an interesting past per his description, which by some accounts could possibly disqualify him under current laws.
Or would you be referring to the attempted murder with the belt?
Yeah, and now there's questions as to the veracity of these claims and whether there was some embellishment and all that. But needless to say, Dr. Carlson has not been a friend to gun rights. He has, in the past, agreed with the assault weapons ban, and his current dalliance with the Second Amendment is designed to garner him votes.
Well, and that's the thing. I think what Ben Carson's chief complaint is that there was, you know, that he was actually getting sabotaged during this caucus. But I can tell you, I haven't heard him specifically say anything that is, you know, pro or con Second Amendment.
I'll tell you, I did see some things that he said in the past that were in support of the assault rifle ban or the assault weapons ban.
1994.
back in '94. Now, I personally, this may have nothing to do with anything, but when he talks, it appears to me like he's on some sort of tranquilizer or something. I hear a guy on Valium when he speaks. A guy with some like benzodiazepine issues, and maybe that's here nor there, but it's not in confidence inspiring in me. So now let's move on to a person who I personally think has the brightest record on firearms rights. May not be the right candidate, but in my estimation, is probably the best candidate out there in this gigantic rigged thing, and that will be Rand Paul.
Well, see, now here's a question I got for you. Do you recognize him as Senator Rand Paul? Do you recognize him as Dr. Rand Paul? I find him very interesting as he's a I guess for lack of a better term, he's a doctor of ophthalmology. So, and not only that, when you go back to his record, he was a non-standard board recognized ophthalmologist because he challenged the state licensing requirements and he came up with his own. So, some people have kind of called that into question. So I just find it interesting that people would refer to Ben Carson as doctor, but not Rand Paul. That's a good point with that. And I think maybe it's because the Paul family has a little bit more recognition as politicians rather than the doctors that they were primarily prior to them, entering politics. But anyhow, I think he's probably got the strongest record and the most healthiest attitude towards firearms rights in the United States. Well, and I think that's one of the things that Rand Paul has a very, I think he's got a very narrow focus, and I think that's something that's harming his candidacy. He likes to get into it during the televised debates with Chris Christie, and he constantly hits on saying what he wants is a president that will actually follow the Constitution and mind the limits of the office of the presidency and respect the separation of powers with regards to whether it be the courts, whether it be the Congress, or whether it be the president. I think that strikes a chord with many of us that say, you know what? Yeah, we have a set of guidelines that has been been the guiding document, the living document that our way of life is patterned for. And we are operating so far outside the bounds of that. No wonder our country's in shambles. But I think that when it comes to quite a few of the issues, Rand Paul largely remains silent, and maybe it's because he doesn't get the airtime, or he doesn't say the controversial things that a Donald Trump would say. He's largely silent.
I'm going to tell you that I do have some major disappointment with Rand Paul. I don't know if you remember when Netanyahu came and addressed the American political body and really kind of like showed us who the boss was. Rand Paul was one of the ones in attendance, and I was very, very disappointed. Now, he did not look happy or joyous like Senator Schumer, for example, during Netanyahu's rambling. But he was still there, and I think maybe he's tied in with that same force. And there's none of the above.
Yeah.
So let's move on. And speaking of none of the above and everything being in a shambles and allied with the occupying forces, we move on to Jeb Bush.
Yeah. And, I don't have anything pleasant to say.
And considering that they are Bushes and people die when they talk shit about the Bushes, we are going to move on to somebody else.
Good call.
The rest of them honestly, are kind of out.
You've ran the gamut of the viable remaining candidates. I personally don't want to talk to the one percenters. We're down one. Huckabee called it quits. I do have to say I give him props for taking a little bit of a shot at himself in saying that the American people have an illness and they're sick of seeing him run. I think that was accurate, and it was a brief moment of levity for him, and I think that he would never have a snowball's chance in hell in earning a nomination. So
right. So all right. So that's enough political discuss for tonight. We've pretty much laid out who's got what views on firearms there for you. And let's move on to our views on firearms. I got a chance to go shoot something new and kind of nifty this week.
Yep, and it is a bolt action with a little bit of a big punch.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a twist, a little unusual. I had the opportunity to go out and shoot a Ruger M77 bolt-action rifle chambered in .357 Magnum. That's right, .357 Magnum, a pistol caliber cartridge in a bolt-action rifle.
And you got to think that's going to put a hurting on something.
I would dare say so. Now, this rifle has an 18-inch barrel on it, and this one was stainless steel, and it's a bolt-action magazine, or a bolt-action rifle, and it takes a magazine, and the magazine is a rotary magazine, very similar to a Ruger 1022 or to one of the rotary magazines for the .44 Magnum. It holds 5 rounds, and it's a very slick feeding from the magazine into the chamber. It's the action is very, very, very nice. It was a very quality built rifle. This one happened to be stainless steel and with a black polymer stock. And I have to say that of all the companies that work with stainless steel, I appreciate Ruger's handiwork the best. I think they really go the extra mile. It's worth every penny that they charge when Ruger has a stainless, for example, their stainless revolvers are just top notch, and this rifle was no exception to that.
How did the action in the barrel get mounted at the stock? Is it glass bedded? Is it pillar bedded? Is it free floating? Go into a little bit of that, because there's some.
It's a free floating stock, and it's a polymer stock, and it comes standard with iron sights on it, and there was a scope mounted on it, the one that I got to shoot. It did not have shoot-through or see-through rings, so I was not able to use the iron sights. But with the scope that was on it, I was shooting at a target 50 yards away, which is not necessarily a super long distance away, but it's, I think within the realm of use of that rifle.
When you think of that .357 coming out of a rifle, what are just thinking about it? Are you thinking that it's going to pound your shoulder when you pull the trigger, or surprisingly was it not that way?
Well, I fired other .357 caliber rifles, mainly lever action rifles, and I found them to be very, very gentle, and the report to be not uncomfortable, at least for my use, without ear protection. This rifle was a little bit different, and I think it's because it is a tad bit lighter than a lever action rifle, the same caliber and length. I found it to have some recoil, but not a punishing amount or anything. I mean, a 12 gauge shotgun has more recoil by far, and I found it to be amazingly accurate.
What was your range you were shooting at?
I was shooting at 50 yards, and it was a walked off 50 yards. It wasn't an exact, lined and measured thing, but it was a walked off 50 yards. And I was shooting at, I can't remember the brand of it, but it's a target that's probably 9x9, and it's full of little red squares. It's like a grid, and then it's got a kind of a diamond and a cross in the middle of it. And I was able to keep, at the 50 yards, pull 5 shots within one of the 1-inch squares, and they were all touching.
Yeah, and that's fairly accurate. That was just shooting offhand, or were you
right there?
Were you shooting through the scope, or were you using the iron sights?
I was using the scope, and yeah, it might be cheating and whatever, but it's how the rifle was presented to me, and I didn't feel right taking off the guy's scope and using the iron sights.
Well, no, some of the scopes that are out there now come with mounts that have see-through, so you can actually.
Yeah, this did not have the see-through rings for the scope.
Right.
So So no, it was just all with the scope, and even with the scope, and at that, I was really impressed with the rifle. I was really, and made me feel good about my skill, probably unnecessarily.
It might have given you a false sense of security.
Maybe, but I mean, it's also kind of a one of the happier things to report. I mean, I've known many people who bought a handgun and it's a quality handgun, and they take it out and they, let's say at 10 yards, and they're shooting high and to the right by a good percentage.
Yeah.
And, maybe with them it's they have to learn how to do something, but it made me feel good that I could at least do that.
So
if nothing else.
How would you say the 357 compares to shooting, say, a 30-30? Both of those chamberings are very common in lever guns. So, you'd have a common platform to shoot from.
Well, I would say that the recoil of the 30-30 in a lever action is probably a little less than it was in this bolt action, but I would almost guess that the same 30-30 cartridge in this bolt action would have significantly more recoil.
Okay.
But I mean, it was not a shoulder puncher by any means, and very nice polymer stock. It came with rings on it for the sling already installed. So this was almost a ready to go out the door rifle, which is a very, very rare find anymore. And available in a handgun caliber, I would dare say the effective range on that rifle is probably about 150 yards. And I think you've got mastery of anything at that range right there.
Well, and that's what's interesting too. I spoke with a colleague of mine today, and he is a big fan of the 270 Winchester round. And generally that's coming in right at 7 millimeters. I think that's kind of the minimum caliber that you should use to take a certain type of game. Generally wild pigs or deer. I mean, wild pigs you can shoot with much less, but they're strong animals, and I think deer.
Well,
you definitely want to put them down quickly.
A lot of people really don't like the 270, and for the simple fact that it's a lot louder. It does have a little bit more punch, and you don't get that much more bullet with it.
Right. Well, but you do get the speed, and that's what the 270 is known for.
But the speed does result in a little bit of punishment to the shoulder, and I think that's why the 243 hangs on to this day. It's just a little less punishing.
Yeah. Well, that's one of those things that I think you're going to find that 357 round very common in cowboy shooting.
Well, and here's the other nifty thing. So this rifle is a 357, and that's what it's marked on the barrel, but it will take a 38.
Okay.
So I thought that was very nice, because there are some 357 lever action rifles that do not accept 38 caliber bullets. Others do, and they're quality, and it's really a nice. In all respects, the 38 Special is almost an outdated cartridge, and not that it's ineffective or anything, but it stems from a black powder design. And that's why you have such a long bullet with almost negligible power compared to like the 357. You've got a very a moderate sized bullet moving fairly slow.
Yeah,
it's a low pressure cartridge.
Well, I mean, you are losing a little bit in terms of the diameter of the individual round, going from the 30-30 down to the 357. You just kind of look at. I think the speed is what draws people to a lot of these different chamberings, especially if it's just not target practice. If they're actually using it for hunting purposes, they want that speed to generate and be able to knock down game and really take the wind out of stuff.
You bring up an interesting point. A lot of people are going with the speedier cartridges that are already available, but then they're also going with a lot of what we would almost consider Wildcat cartridges that have now become almost an established Wildcat. Let's say like a
and
6.8.
I think anything in that 6mm range, whether from the high side in the 6mm, like the 6.8, down to the 243 or the 6mm itself, you're going to see that those rounds, a lot of those came out of the 50s. The different Wildcatters in the day. Those are what a lot of the precision shooters.
Right, and that's what I'm going to get at here, is that the guys that shoot in that 6mm range tend to not be hunters. They tend to be paper punchers.
That is correct. And there's absolutely nothing
with the
wrong
exception
with
of the 243 and the 270. I'm talking about the guys like the 6.5, the 6.8, the 6. Whatever.
Yeah, a lot of them that
if
have
it's a
parent
243 or a
that are
270 or some 6.5 Swedish, some sort of old military round, yeah, those guys tend to be the hunters. But the guys with the odd 6mm rounds tend to just punch paper.
Yeah. And like I said, you're talking about guys that are putting holes on top of holes. And that's great. If you have the opportunity to get out there and go to a range and put that time in, that's only going to benefit you. It's probably going to give you an opportunity to be an ambassador for the shooting sports, because people are going to watch you. People are going to watch you be super accurate with your chosen rifle. And you may be able to pass that interest or that ability on to somebody who just may have a passing interest.
Well, I can say that I've always been a fan of a pistol caliber carbine or a pistol caliber rifle, and with this Ruger M77, I'm even that much more firmly cemented in it. I really like the idea of a guy being able to throw on his 357 revolver and grab his rifle and a box of bullets, and he's good to go for both. I really like that idea.
Yeah. Well, and I think some of the other interesting news we have out there is before we jump to that, I'd like to kind of continue on this pistol caliber carbine thing and maybe bring up a suggestion if we happen to have anybody who's got any kind of power listening. I'd like to see a bolt-action rifle available in 9mm. Yeah, that was one of the things I think we were going to talk about, is that, coming, we're a week and a half removed from SHOT Show. I'm not seeing a whole lot of innovation in that area.
I don't think I did really either. I think the two big new products was the Kimber revolver, and Heiser Defense has made a semi-automatic 45, which is very similar to the double tap 45 and 9mm Derringers. But this is actually a semi-automatic, and I believe it's a 5-shot semi-automatic at 45 ACP, and it's billed as the thinnest semi-automatic firearm, and it appears to be about the exact same size as the double tap 9mm. Now that's two completely different principles of design and function, so it remains to be seen. But that's about it for the innovation, because honestly, Kimber's revolver isn't really all that innovative. To me, it looked like a copy of a fancy Ruger.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm not a super big fan of the pistol caliber carbines. They have their place. I think that if you've got a 9mm, that's going to do some good. Like if you're talking any of the old German MP5s or whatnot, I think that's great for close quarter situations. At distance, I don't think that's such a good idea. But
no, and that kind of goes with the whole what is your idea? Somebody may ask you, well, what's the best gun? Well, what's your idea?
Yeah, I mean, what's your function and purpose?
What are you just what's your qualifying events for the best gun? Is it the most comfortable to hold? Is it the most accurate? Is it the most rugged? Is it the most popular?
Yeah, definitely don't go out and buy firearms because they're the most popular. Don't do that. Yeah,
because you end up with a 40 cal that way.
Yeah. No, I mean there's plenty of firearms that are introduced, whether they're through the NRA, American Rifleman, or the other guns and ammo type magazines. There's a lot of advertising that gets put into that, and to get an honor bestowed upon you means that you as a manufacturer were willing to ship out a lot of guns to different writers and tell them, hey, go out there and shoot it, and by the way, keep it. So
Right. So
I don't necessarily put a lot of stock in that.
It kind of like feeds into the whole corruption of the entire system, doesn't it?
Well,
Hey,
it does.
I took a look back at chat, and here we are talking about pistol caliber carbines, and they've got an entirely different discussion going about rifle caliber pistols.
Okay. Yeah.
What do you think on that?
Well, rifle caliber pistols. I mean, I think the first one that comes to my mind is the 5.56 that basically takes an AR and converts it into a pistol by removing the stocks and implementing a arm brace.
Okay, now I would think immediately of a 7.62 by 39 Draco.
Well, you could think of that, or you can think of oh gosh, there was going back in the day. I believe that there was some German or even Russian. They had some ammunition that was originally a rifle chambering and was converted to the pistols. And
we got to give a shout out to Cracker for bringing up. Cracker is one of the friends of the show and a good friend of mine. Brings up a 30 caliber carbine pistol, and that was the Ruger Blackhawk in 30 caliber carbine, and that was a single action pistol, shooting a great big bullet for a pistol caliber or for a pistol size.
So we can actually go to the other extreme, going on the low side. You remember the Ruger Charger?
Ruger Charger is a nifty little item. It's a Ruger 1022 action built into a pistol.
So I believe that would qualify.
I think those are pretty neat. Now, 22 that brings up, how versatile a 22 caliber pistol is, or the 22 caliber round in itself, especially 22 long rifle. But if a guy was preparing for the end of the world and he needed to get 3 guns, a 22 rifle and a 22 pistol creates a really handy way to have, that same interchangeable firepower and an ammunition commonality, which makes kind of loading out a little bit easier.
Yeah, and I mean that's one of those things that I think that a lot of people may not have experienced ever firing a 22 pistol. You're talking about like firing a 22 through a revolver. That's a loud experience.
Well, and it depends on what the barrel length on the revolver is, because I know exactly the time we're talking about, and that was, let's be honest here, it was completely unshielded of the ears, and it was a 2-inch barreled revolver. So that I think is what attenuated the sound. Now I've got a 6-inch barrel Smith & Wesson old caper. It's a 5-digit serial number. It's actually kind of neat. It's a K22 pistol, and it's one of my treasures. And that's got a 6-inch barrel on it. And I'll tell you what, I don't think it's really all that loud. Yeah. And I live within the city limits, and I've just parked it in the backyard, and not had any kind of issues with hey, you're shooting a gun off your backyard, let's cuff and stuff.
Yeah. Well, and you take a look at the Mauser C96. Now that had the 7.63 by 25, as well as going to the 9mm. So and
then it had 30 caliber Luger as well.
Yeah. Different chamberings all the way from 8mm on up to 9mm and 45.
So would you look at a bottleneck pistol cartridge as kind of a compromise between a pistol round and a rifle round?
Yeah, I would think it tries to take the best of both.
Bottleneck cartridges generally have a much greater speed than a cartridge of a similar diameter that's got a straight wall.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to the modification of those rounds, trying to get the most out of either the speed or the power. I think that you've got to have such tight tolerances that a lot of times it just doesn't work out in your favor.
And then when you start getting into those tight tolerances, you start looking at a lot of money. And in these rifle caliber pistols, we cannot overlook the Thompson Contender series. Those are single shot pistols that are available in almost every rifle caliber. And I'm talking from, 17 HMR all the way up to, I think they've got a 358, or what's that, 47, is it a 417 JTAC?
Ooh, yeah.
I believe, I mean, it's just a hair shy of 50 caliber. And, they've got something all the way in between. And
that's one of the things that I think, we haven't really talked about Thompson Center and their firearms on our show.
Well, it's because, let's be honest, because they're very expensive.
Well, they're very expensive, and one of the things that folks should know is that there is a safety recall notice on all Thompson Center firearms, specifically the Icon, Venture, and Dimension rifles, manufactured before June 13th, 2013.
Now, are those the black powder and inline rifles, or are those a center fire rifle?
Well, this is straight from their website. They have a safety recall notice out there, and this is saying that it is a bolt gun. So,
okay,
this is the Icon Classic, the Weather Shield, the Icon Precision Hunter, Warlord, and Field. And
those are pretty nifty names.
Yeah, and this basically is stating that there's a malfunction or a condition where the safety lever in certain rifles may bind, preventing the safety from becoming fully engaged. So this is one of those things that kind of reminds me of the Remington 870 recall.
Well, or the 887.
Right.
Is what it was, wasn't it? And then the SPX, and yeah, there's. I think this lack of quality kind of also bundles up with the lack of innovation at the SHOT Show.
Yeah, I think that we're not in a golden age of manufacturing right now. Definitely not in innovation. I think, was it the 870s or was it the 11? I'm pretty sure it was the 870s that, for a good period of time, they have failed to cycle rounds that aren't specifically with the ammo that Remington calls for being used in them.
Right, and this is an iconic American design. This is the pump action shotgun, the Remington 870, probably in possession of, I'd say a good third of all people in the United States who own a shotgun, and I'd probably dare say in the possession of 50% of law enforcement, stockpiles in the United States. And, to take such a simple and time-honored design and kind of like screw it up bad, really, really tarnish Remington's reputation. And, we'd be remiss to not mention that Remington is part of Freedom Group owned by George Soros. Yeah. And we all know that George Soros is a big scumbag.
So, one of the guns that I think I've wanted to talk about, but we haven't, mainly because I don't own one, and I don't know anybody that does own one. But, we talk about classic firearms that are American. What do you think about the Ruger #1?
I'll tell you what, dude, I can't afford one of those.
Not many people can.
Those are very, very nice. And go ahead and describe what the Ruger #1 is.
So this is a falling block rifle. It's iconic in the sense that it's got a very large trigger guard. That's basically your cocking lever. This is something that's being chambered over the years in just about every configuration you can think of, all the way from 204 Ruger down to the 450 and 400 Nitro Express. So you got the versatility of going from a Safari or a big game, big 5 African big game gun, all the way down to super tight tolerance in the 204 Ruger, 22 Hornet. all your 22 calibers. Yeah, I mean, everything in between. I think the only thing that it wasn't chambered in was, it's in the 7mm Magnum, but they didn't chamber it in the 8mm Magnum. I'm sorry, 8mm Mauser. They have the 30-06, the 303 British, 300 Winchester Magnum, everything in between. I honestly think that it's iconic in the sense of its function. It's a little bit more of something that maybe you had a grandfather that purchased one back in the 60s.
Well,
or
it's
70s.
just in simple operation does harken back to a different time, and not everything needs to be polymer stocked with
Right, and this is something that,
and
that
four
has
grips and
this is something that has a significant amount of wood on it, and it just has the look of a classic rifle.
well, and it is a time honored design. If not necessarily the latest design, and quite possibly considered to be obsolete, it is still quite functional,
Right.
and capable of doing what it was originally intended to do.
Right, and it's very rare that I actually see one come available on gun boards. So here we go. Speaking of gun boards, let's bring up the Facebook issue.
All right, so this is kind of big news for anybody who uses social media in conjunction with firearms. And if you do, and you're a user of Facebook and a connoisseur of firearms, you've probably been aware that there is a local group in your area that is dedicated to the person-to-person transaction of firearms. And, many different, your state here, your city here, gun trader. Facebook has taken upon themselves to ban any sort of transaction that does not go through a background check. So they will still continue to have gun-related groups, but they will only be from FFL dealers. And the White House has refused to comment on whether or not they were involved with this. We do know that Zuckerberg and Obama like to hang out and pull bongs together and, sip a little bit of Manischewitz and, watch some TV. So, yeah, I don't see the White House not being involved with this. Facebook is a private entity. So, I mean, it is their playground, their rules. I don't think it does anything for the stereotype of how Zionists are looking after Americans' gun rights.
Yeah. Well, and this is one of the things that I think, a lot of gun owners and a lot of gun enthusiasts kind of got to take into account whenever they get on social media. We talked about the ITAR, I believe it was the legislation that was pending that was going to prohibit transfer of information relating to gun designs and whatnot. This is something that's a precursor or a change, I think. There's possibilities in different states across the nation to shut down person-to-person sales of firearms, and that's one of the things. Like here in the state where I live, our governor just overruled his own attorney general, who's of the same party and both very well connected to Hillary Clinton, saying that the attorney general wanted to ban reciprocity for concealed carry holders. The governor turned around and struck a deal with the Republicans in the state and has agreed to restore reciprocity in exchange for prohibiting certain persons from having access to firearms during periods of court protective orders, and to make the state police available at gun shows should private sellers wish to conduct background checks. And my question is, how long till that becomes mandatory?
Well, and this is also a step in the same direction that California's taken. California now has domestic violence restraining orders, or I'm sorry, gun violence restraining orders. And basically it's somebody thought that you may be possibly dangerous with a firearm. And they decided that you should be called in, and you lose your due process. Those firearms are taken from you, and you are granted a court date somewhere down the road, and you're only granted one. It's pretty draconian in its scale and its impact. And it looks like that could be the plan for the rest of the nation. There haven't been any kind of court challenges to the California GVRO, but
well, I mean,
we'll
it's very similar to what you know. When I think of states that just enact gun legislation just to do it, I automatically think of New York and California. And God bless the gun-owning citizens of each of those states, because they jump through hoops.
The bookends of Bolshevism.
Yeah, I mean, they responsible gun owners in those two states have to jump through hoop after hoop to exercise a God-given right. And that's one of the things that I feel bad for folks. I mean, you can't own a standard capacity 1911 in New York State. You can't own a standard capacity semi-automatic pistol in most manufacturers' designs.
You can't own the brand new Smith & Wesson 8-shot 357 revolver.
Oh, that 8-shot's gonna be the one that breaks the camel's back.
Well, you'll just have to do it the old West style. Load one, skip one, and then load the rest. Right?
Yeah. No telling which ones that's gonna be either.
Don't let that hammer rest on a live chamber. It might blow a hole in your toe there, partner.
Well, we also got the Defense Distributed suing the Department of State. Yeah, for our listeners that might remember Defense Distributed, the Liberator pistol.
The 3D printer guys.
There you go.
And it's Cody Wilson, I believe is his name.
Yes.
All right, so they've got a lawsuit against the government.
Yep,
what's going on with that?
The Second Amendment Foundation.
Oh, that's cool.
So
I'm not necessarily a fan of Alan Gottlieb, but go right ahead.
So I think that's interesting. That's that's standing up, and you could say that they were kind of targeted specifically for their innovation.
Yeah, they brought something that really wasn't available to the masses before, and with the revolution in 3D printing. And while their designs may not have been the penultimate designs, they were the ones that kind of got the ball rolling. And now there's many designs out there. Something I've seen in the 3D printed world, if anybody wants to take a look for it, it's called the Wash Bear Revolver. And not washboard, but Wash Bear. And
are we talking the German wash bear, like raccoon?
Maybe that's what it means. WASHBEAR,
yeah.
And it's a 6-shot 22 polymer revolver, complete polymer revolver. Minus the identifying hunk of metal that's mandated by law.
Yeah,
in it,
which would be to prevent it from being a ghost gun.
That's right. And thank you, Senator Kevin De Leon of the state of California. You hypocritical bastard.
Yeah, so I it's interesting. I think that as we now get into the full political spectrum of the election cycle, I want to see more Second Amendment issues come to the front, because we've got a report about a law enforcement officer who was taking a course at a community college in his off time, having just left work, but he was still in his uniform, and the instructor teaching the class felt uneasy and had the individual removed. And this was in Georgia. Of all states that you would figure are pretty gun friendly, it just goes to show you that academia at whatever level still believes.
Academia suffers from hoplophobia greatly, and that's what the irrational fear of firearms is called, is hoplophobia. And it's. I always find it funny that people wish to regulate and restrict items they don't fully understand.
Yeah, well, it's the fear mongering,
It's my feelings.
Yeah, you can't argue with feelings. That's one thing we've learned.
Stop stepping on my feet.
I need a safe space.
Speaking speaking of safe space, let's go into the 4 rules of firearm safety.
There you go. Good segue.
All right, first rule of firearm safety is every firearm is loaded until you physically and visually inspect that firearm is not loaded. Rule number 2 is keep the muzzle pointed in a safe direction at all times. Don't cover anything with that barrel that you don't want to destroy. Rule number 3 is know what your target is and know what's beyond your target at all times. And rule number 4 is the most important, the most vital, the one that everybody must follow. It's keep your booger hook off the bang switch until you are ready to discharge the weapon. Keep your finger outside of the trigger guard until you are ready to put bullets down range. Don't walk around with your finger on it. Don't pick up a gun and immediately finger the trigger.
Yeah. So, I actually got a chance to go to a real Army post today. It's been quite a while since I've been back on a regular Army post, and had the benefit of taking two young non-commissioned officers to go get issued some gear so that they can go ahead and attend what's called the U.S. Army Sobolowski Air Assault School at Fort Campbell in Kentucky. Fort Campbell straddles the Kentucky-Tennessee line. And while there, we ended up having to go to the Central Issue Facility, which is this big warehouse where they issue soldiers various pieces of gear. And being the seasoned or grizzled sergeant that I am, I'm always on the lookout for random pieces of military equipment. And while there was a amnesty bin that I promptly inquired about whether or not I was free to pick and choose from, and I was told that you can go ahead and take whatever you want. And I managed to walk out of there with quite a few pieces of equipment, namely 2 different holsters, a drop leg holster for an M9, as well as a shoulder holster for an M9 that also comes with 2 magazine pouches. I thought that was the greatest thing ever.
That is pretty nifty. Are you now going to purchase an M9 for that? Because that's an interesting item. Those M9 holsters. They don't only fit the Beretta 92 and the M9, but they do fit a 1911. They fit a Browning high power. They fit the CZ75 series. So that's a pretty versatile holster, even though it's designed for the Beretta 92 or the M9, and they're quite well made.
Yeah, and having carried the M9 in Iraq for 15 months, I was very used to wearing the drop leg holsters. It was what I was comfortable with. So that's definitely there. And then the shoulder holster, that's good for when you're driving. I think in places like Texas now where open carry is legal, that might be something interesting.
Okay, now let's talk about Texas open carry for a minute. I have still not seen anybody carry open.
Well, I think that in certain situations you don't want to carry open, especially in like an active shooter situation. You make yourself a target for somebody that's obviously bent on doing some harm. In Virginia we have open carry, so quite a few people do, and it doesn't ever alarm anybody. I mean, it's a right within the state. So
right now, and I think that's kind of the great big difference between Texas open carry and Virginia open carry, or say like Arizona open carry, or any of the other states with open carry, is that this is a brand new right in Texas, and Texas is growing, and it's not necessarily growing to the more conservative side or to the more traditional side. It's you're getting a lot of new
getting displaced Californians is what you're getting.
Displaced Californians, trying exactly what I'm trying to say, and they don't necessarily look at firearms the same way. So
because
I don't think
they're moving to take over yours.
Right.
Well, man, it's another hour gone by, Michael. Where does the time go?
I think it was a speedball night. I'd like to thank Jules and UCY.TV. This is a really innovative platform. Gives us the right to be not necessarily the most popular radio show out there, but we're going to say exactly what we feel, and I really appreciate the opportunity to do it. I mean, to me, it's a gift and something that can't be replaced.
Yeah, I want to say a big shout out to our folks in chat, all our regular listeners. A big shout to my buddy Chris, keeping his head up down there and taking care of the kiddos tonight. We want to try and get him on the show here again. Michael, it's great to talk to you.
Great. Nick, it was awesome. Everybody, stick around. You see what out there. Thank you, Joel.